It was just the timing. I went under the wave and it just pushed me, bam, like that, and a crack. I think that's the closest I thought I was gonna die.
You have to swim and you have to put yourself in serious situations or unique angles.
You really gotta almost take someone with you into that situation for them to comprehend what you're doing and where you are.
It can be -2 and you're putting a wet wetsuit on at 6 in the morning, it's pitch black and you're waiting for the sun to rise, and yeah, it gets pretty extreme.
And I think that's probably the biggest danger, is taking a fin or a surfboard to the face.
You don't want to get too close. You'll get dragged across the reef if the wave catches you.
When a wave picks you up and throws you over and you get sent down with the lip,
it's actually quite manageable, but from the outside looking in, people are like, that's crazy, that's mad, it's a dangerous thing to do.
When your brain is telling you you're caught inside, you're toast, that's when it gets scary.
Water photographers capture images seen in magazines and social media worldwide. Little do people know how these images are produced and the dangers involved in getting the shot. Surfing is one of the most exhilarating adventure sports on the planet. The athleticism on display by world-class surfers, continually pushing the boundaries of what seems to be humanly possible on massive waves. It's a visual masterpiece for any photographer. As the sport began to progress, the creation of surf magazines began to develop. The need to fill the pages with action-packed images became a necessity. Soon, the surf photographer was born. It was this innovative group that pioneered shooting from the water, paving the way for the future generations that changed the way the world would view surfing, seen in the magazines around the globe.
I arrived in Hawaii in, say, 1971, and I just remember that there was no pioneers anywhere to be seen. You know, it was scary because I'd be by myself going, okay, I have my water housing, and I'm looking out at these horrible looking shore break. There was no mentors then to say, okay, paddle out here, let me hold your hand, you know. And so in that sense, it was really intimidating.
Like in Hawaii, there wasn't that many of us. So as far as water photographers, I didn't have a zillion heads in my way. I mean, there was a few, a few hardcore guys, and everybody kind of not cut everybody off, or they would get yelled at.
When I first started shooting pictures back in 1978, I actually made my first water housing out of plexiglass. It was a terrible housing, but it worked.
We had to break down the door with the camera equipment. It's nothing like you guys have now with a digital and put a card in and shoot 2,000 photos in one go and shoot 14 frames a second.
When I was shooting with guys like Scott Eichner, who would shoot with film and they're swimming in the water, it was no joke. It was you had to be so much more patient, you had to be so much more precise, you had to be so much more lucky.
Back in the day, let's say I go in the water, I have 36 pictures. You pick those photos. We had to be very selective in all our shooting because we had to go all the way back to the beach. I used to consider a 3-roll day was a really good day.
When you swam out, it was a big deal to pick and choose what you shot. And there were so many times where you'd hold back on shooting and you should have shot, but you knew you had such a limited amount of film and you didn't want to have to swim right back inside again to change film because it's kind of heavy going in and out of pipeline. So you really tried to make it last.
In film days, we really savored our shots and waited for the ultimate moment and the ultimate wave, and everything had to come together. And nothing more important than the last shot that we savored, which was number 36 on a 36 exposure roll. And many of my best, most classic, famous shots were actually frame 36.
Especially when you only had one shot left in the camera. I remember sitting out there for hours waiting for the perfect moment to finish off that last shot.
I've had some photographer friends that got water shots, and when we used to shoot film, and they'd be in their little office in Hawaii or in the room, and they'd call me in, and I'd walk into the room and they'd be doing a little dance like football players do, and they do a touchdown. I go, "What's up? What? You know, look at this, you know." And it'd be like one good water shot. That's how exciting it is.
Yeah, for the guys that paved the way in water photography, I cannot imagine. And I took it for granted because I was on the other side of the lens when I was doing my bodyboarding thing. I was just like shooting with those guys. I had no idea what they were dealing with.
So like if I swam out with a film camera, it would last probably like, I don't know, 3-4 minutes. I'd just get excited. I'd be like, whoa, the first wave, and someone do something cool, and then it'd be like 36 shots gone. Yeah, so yeah, I wouldn't last.
So when I think of some of the legends of surf photography, like the Dan Merkels, Jeff Devines, and Brian Bielmanns, you know, I get so much inspiration from them. Their gear was really limited compared to today. They were shooting film. I look at those guys as real photographers. I mean, anybody can get out there with a GoPro and get some great shots, and it's made it a lot easier for us.
There's a lot of old school photographers that I admire. Jim Russi is one of them. He gave me some pointers, which is amazing, you know. He's such a humble guy and has amazing work. He's been in the business for years.
Those guys really had the raw end of the deal, but they've paved the way for us to have it how we have it now. So yeah, so grateful for all those guys, and yeah, it's pretty amazing to be part of the photography industry, I guess, now, and yeah, so grateful.
I don't know how they do it. I mean, like, sometimes it's hard enough just getting out to the lineup, and then to think you only have like a roll of 32 or 36 shots or whatever it was.
You might be swimming for a couple hours, you need to take 36 shots, and it's just crazy. So massive respect for them guys.
And that was the whole difference, the anticipation, the waiting, you know? It's like nowadays you just shoot the photo and you look in the back of the camera and you immediately see what it looks like. And that's great for an insecure photographer, which, you know, I myself probably am. I guess it's nice to see the photos and know you've got it, but there was something magical about having to wait and then seeing the photos the next day as they came out of the lab, and you got to look at the light box with all your photos lined up.
You didn't see anything until months later. You open the magazine or you look at it on the front cover and you're like, whoa, that's me, you know? And like, you didn't know that photo even existed. You didn't even know there was a guy shooting. You didn't know anything. And now it's like you know immediately because somebody posted it. Or you see a land photo and then you see all these photographers in the wave sometimes, and you're like, oh yeah, that guy's in the right spot. Yeah, maybe this guy too. And then you can kind of maybe identify who it is and hit them up separately, like, hey, you get that shot. But yeah, it's just different. It's different now.
So another thing about waiting for you to see your photos is that, especially when you go out in the water, is you kind of memorize moments, because on the land you're getting a lot more material. In the water it's more finite, where you're it's breaking in one spot. But when everything comes together and the wave pitches out and the surfer's in the right position and all that, you remember that. You go, oh, I got it. So then the waiting time drives you crazy. It's even 24 hours would drive you crazy. And because I used to memorize, you kind of in your mind's eye, you memorize these moments, but you don't know if you really got it till it comes back. And the really interesting thing is some things you never thought of came out really good, and other things you thought were going to be really good come out terrible.
I think any time you have to wait to see something or hear something or get something, you always kind of value it a little bit more.
I remember we would shoot all of our film and the next day wake up and we'd be hoping that it wasn't any good, because then we got to all take our roll of film in and go to the lab and drop it all off, and then we'd go to the movies, we'd have lunch, we'd do all these fun things, and we'd get to look at our photos when we were done. And it was kind of like Halloween. It was like trick or treat, you know? You'd either be super surprised or you'd be super bummed.
So the first clear memory I have of meeting Dan Merkel is I was at the Haleiwa post office on the North Shore of Oahu and picking up my mail. He said to me, "You're the best backside surfer at Pipeline this year." And I was so stoked. It was such an honor to hear that coming from like the best surf photographer in the world, to hear him say that. And it really gave me like a lot of confidence for my career.
I was introduced to a man named Dan Merkel, who was a few years older than me and a very well-respected water photographer and a hero of mine. And he was an amazing water photographer, just a beast of a guy. And a lot of guys probably didn't get along with him that well, but I got along with him really well. And he took me under his wing and really helped me to develop my water shots, he introduced me to the magazines, he introduced me to both the photo editors at Surfer and Surfing, which was Art Brewer at Surfer and Larry Moore at Surfing in those days, and like recommended me to them and really went out of his way to help me, swam me out at Pipe, showed me the ropes, and so I always like to give Dan a lot of credit because he was certainly my mentor.
The motivation was once I took some water shots, I wanted to get better at it. And then I wanted to get really good at it. And then I wanted to beat out the other guys. You know, it was a drive. When I worked at Surfing Magazine, there was Surfing Magazine and Surfer Magazine. When I was a staff photographer, basically, and it's not hating anybody, it's to want to outdo the other guys.
You know, I have so many heroes from growing up as a young kid here on the North Shore and seeing these other surf photographers before I actually started being one myself. And I'd have to say Dan Merkel, he was the most badass of all of them. I mean, Dan was the first guy to swim out the back door and pull into the barrel with these guys.
You know, there's sometimes not a lot of room in the tube, and you got Dan floating, not on a mat, he's floating there holding this camera up. And I learned that with Dan, I could aim straight towards him. And Dan had no fear at all. And he would just wait, and he wouldn't move because he knew that if I went by him and he moved, he'd hit me in the head with his camera. I mean, that's how close I got to him. But I had absolute confidence in Dan, in his courage, that no matter what, no matter how, if the lip was going to nail him in the head, Dan would be there still. And I could just ride past him on the inside or the outside, but there was no movement, no fear, no flailing, no trying to dive to the bottom. He was just still. And it was almost, in some ways, like he wasn't even there.
You know, some of the guys in the early days, like Dan Merkel, they were more aggressive, so to speak. I was more conservative. And he would just go right into the zone often to get, he was the best in the world at the time. He'd be shooting kind of in what I would call the danger zone. And 2 or 3 hour session, I'd see him get launched maybe 2 or 3 times, and he'd be yelling, laughing, ah! Then a surfer would get his raft and kind of push it out to him, or sometimes he'd swim in to get it. But I'll tell you, there's nothing scarier than having a wall at Sunset Beach and you know you're caught inside.
Yeah, and Dan, besides just swimming me out to Pipeline, he actually wrote a letter. I remember the first time he came over, looked at my images, and he separated them. They were slides, and he separated them into two different piles. He said, send this pile to surfing and this pile to surfer. And he wrote a letter, a handwritten letter on notebook paper. I remember 3-ring binder notebook paper, handwritten letter from Dan Merkel to Art Brewer at Surfer and to Larry Moore at Surfing, recommending that they take a good look at my serious look at my images, and that I'd be a good guide to a good resource for them here in Hawaii. So again, thank you, Dan.
Nobody else was doing what Dan was doing, but it became kind of commonplace. So every time it happened, you go, "Whoop, here he goes again. He's gonna get it." Because where I was, you'd see these sets approaching, and then I'd start adjusting. You know, I had these big fins on, and I would adjust, right? I'd look over and go, "Oh, Dan's toast." Sure enough, bada boom, he's getting launched on his raft, and he'd be yelling and laughing.
Actually, JD posted a picture, that's Jeff Devine, of me going up a wave at sunset, and I've jumped off the air mat, and I'm holding with one hand and jumping into the wave to pull it, because the air mat's got volume of air, you know, to pull that air mat through the wave. And then if I felt I was being sucked over, then I let the thing go. But you have that drive that you want to get the picture. You want to get a good picture, you know? You want to get it in the magazine. The notoriety, putting your butt on the line.
Though the family of water photographers stretches around the globe, they're all driven by the same passion of capturing the perfect shot.
I think people don't realize how good the waves are in Ireland. You know, they are world class. You just got to be able to stomach the freezing cold. You know, you got to be able to handle that your fingers are going to feel like they're falling off halfway through the surf. And you know, once you can get past that part, the waves are some of the best in the world, if not the best in the world.
A lot of the time when people see my images, they don't really think they're from the UK and in Cornwall. Like, some of them look as good as they could be anywhere in the world.
Water photographers must be both bold and brazen in defying the dangers of the ocean.
I mean, every time a photographer goes in the water, they take a chance they could die. The housing could hit you. The wave can drill you to the bottom. You have to put yourself in positions that you can get hurt.
A guy named John Mozo died at Pipeline by hitting the bottom. So one of the biggest dangers is either getting hit by a surfer as he's, you know, you're swimming and he's coming at you from up there, and it comes down, and his fin or his board might clip you. Therefore, you try to wear a helmet.
I was really fearing for my life because I had lost my breath. I got hit by, 3 or 4 just massive sets. I got 2 cramps in my calves and my feet bent, and I was trying to grab my calves and hold on to my housing. And I literally could not get into the shore. And so I had to swim out as far as I could to just get my breath and actually get on the lifeguard boat. And if it wasn't for them, man, I don't know what I would have done.
There's always the thought about sharks in, certain parts of the world. There's places I don't necessarily like to shoot because there's a lot of sharks around.
What people don't realize with England is we have such a variety of waves, and we have loads of reefs and slabs, and yeah, it can be super dangerous being out there on these reef breaks where this massive wall of water's coming towards you, and if you're in the wrong spot, you're just going to get slammed right into that reef.
But there's also, the situation where you're shooting a wave and a giant set comes and you're swimming outside to get away from the breaking wave, and the next thing you know, you're caught outside and the currents are sucking you out and you can't get back in. That's a really scary feeling too.
The housings can become a weapon, but if that housing got loose out of your hand and hit you in the head, it could knock you out. And it would, you can die, and photographers have died.
One time I was I felt like I was gonna drown, and then I went in. I saw the waves still pumping, and I really want to get the shot. So I went back out, set comes again, and I was like, oh no, I think I'm gonna call it a day, because 2 times in a row, I think the 3rd one could have been a disaster.
Reef is extremely shallow at times. And on top of that, there's a lot of caves, but more like shelves, and you can potentially get pushed underneath one of those and not know where you are, and push off the bottom, hit your head. A lot of people get knocked out that way.
So when I was coming in today, it's not a crazy big day out there or anything, but a smaller wave that I had wanted to push me in towards the beach, actually the whitewash shoved me down and it pushed me into a hole, and then I just got rattled around in this hole, and then finally and it was hit my hip, hit my shoulder, and then it just I heard it scratching, hitting my head and on my helmet. And so all these scratches right here are just from that one little adventure in the hole. It just goes to show you though, on any size day, the ocean, it can just be dangerous, and you just have to have a healthy amount of respect for it in any situation and at any size.
I think swimming out in big waves, you have to be prepared, and not just physically, but also mentally. So I just sit for a while, watch the waves for a little bit, try to assess the risks. And you have to be very aware about what you feel. Sometimes your body is in perfect shape, but your mind isn't in it, So you have to be very honest with yourself and try to listen to yourself, to what you're feeling.
It gets a little bit scary if you feel like you've lost control and Mother Nature's taken over control of you, like you're a little nothing in the ocean. That's when it gets kind of scary, is when you've lost what your educated ocean brain has been telling you to avoid, and then all of a sudden you start realizing, uh-oh, this is going on, this is going on, this is going on.
Describing getting picked off, it's when you see a set coming and you know you're not gonna get far enough out into deeper water or to the side of the wave. It means I'm gonna get caught, myself or other water photographers. We're gonna be in the impact zone. We're not in the part of the curl where it goes over us. We're in front of that, and being in front of that white water is the most dangerous part, because that's where it hits, and then we'll drive down to the bottom and it can explode back up. And then that explosion is terrifying.
A lot of drownings, I suspect, are not drownings from drowning itself per se. It's more like the panic. And of course, a lot of bad things happen when you panic, like your heart rate goes way up and your oxygen utilization goes off the charts, and you're just burning through oxygen at a much faster rate. So for people that aren't experienced with going out in big surf, that may be difficult to relate to, because a lot of people could comfortably sit on their sofa at home watching TV and say, oh, I'm gonna see how long I can hold my breath, a minute, 2 minutes, whatever, it's not that hard. And they're like, well, a wave's only gonna hold you under for like 10 or 20 seconds, right? That's nothing. But in reality, like your heart rate's, is significantly elevated, and you're sort of like hyperventilating a little bit. 10 seconds underwater getting thrashed around just feels like an eternity sometimes.
The way to not panic, first of all, is to feel like you're physically in good enough shape so when you have situations occur, you don't panic.
You'll be able to hold your breath longer if you're relaxed while you're getting thrashed and tossed around and held under the water. Vice, if you're panicking, you're not going to be able to hold your breath for very long, and you increase your chances of drowning and having a worse injury as a result so much more if you panic than if you just stay calm.
There's no surf photographer who's going to say, oh, I've been in this terrible conditions, but I've never panicked. Like, everyone panics. You get to that point where, like, okay, I'm holding my breath, and then it lasts that, like, maybe 10 seconds longer than you think it should, and you kind of go, like, your body starts going, uh-oh, like, why aren't I popping up yet?
You really have to want it. Otherwise, you're going to be out there and going to get in situations that are dangerous. I think it's pretty important that we look out for each other, because it's dangerous, man. The ocean's, it's no joke. Some people take it for granted, but it's a dangerous place. On that day, I was catching a lot of waves. I got like 5 or 6 waves, and the waves were slowly decreasing in size, and then more surfers were coming out, one or two. And then at the point when it happened, there were probably about 10 guys in the lineup, and I just caught a wave, and I was paddling back out and just watching a surfer on the wave, and he kind of fell funny on a big wave, so I just kept watching, and which I usually do, just to make sure the guys are right. And all the other years of my experience, the board's there, and then you see him pop up usually. And I was just watching, and his board was like this with his leash holding under, and he wasn't coming up. And it actually took me a while to register, because usually they pop up. But then something just told me, okay, it's too long now. So I just quickly rushed over, and fortunately I was able to get him up. He still had his leg leash on his board, pulled him up, and when I got him, his face was blue, and he looked like he was dead to me, to be honest. That's why I tried to get a breath of CPR in him, and the waves were all turbulent and rushing, and we got hit by a wave after I grabbed him in the beginning, and he ended up getting knocked out of my arms. But then I got him again, and eventually the side current kind of moves down to where the waves are smaller. Eventually we got down there, and I was kind of thinking the whole time, where the lifeguards, and then felt like a while, but it was probably quicker. But then eventually the lifeguards got there, and I was pretty exhausted by that time, so I'll just let them do their thing. But that's basically it, what happened. And yeah, I was lucky I was just there at the right time, the right moment to be able to help.
Many people may see the ocean as a dangerous and unforgiving place, but for others it is a place to find peace, solace, and tranquility.
What it takes to be a water photographer, I think passion is the #1 thing.
You have to be able to not only physically swim for hours on end, mentally, you have to be patient, you have to be steadfast in what you, and committed to what you want to do and what you want to see.
The mental part of water photography has to do with feeling comfortable in your skin and feeling comfortable in your skin in the ocean.
Respect for the ocean and what it can do, and knowing your abilities and your limits, and also respect for the people that you're working around and working with too.
Also, you need to have where you're motivated and you fall in love with it. And so you go out there a lot, because it takes a lot to get a good one, and it doesn't bother you that you've just wasted 2 or 3 hours. So I think you kind of have to be single, in shape, no career, and stoked and addicted to doing it and excited. And I mean, it's really an awesome thing to do.
To be a good water photographer, you have to have a vision of wanting to have your photo look the way you want it to look. And for the most part, you better be in good shape. I'd say that's probably the biggest thing, is being in good shape.
People are often in awe of what it takes to get the perfect photograph, seen in the surf magazines from around the world.
When the general public looks at your photos that you've shot from the water, you know, because of your background and knowledge, it probably was fun for you, but to them it's like, whoa. I always love the story of when the first inside the tube looking out photos came out, which were in a George Greeno movie called Innermost Limits of Pure Fun. And a friend of mine was up in San Francisco and he went to a showing of it. People were passing joints and all this. This is in the, whatever it was, the early 70s. My friend looked around, he was going to college, and he looked behind him, and all the big philosophical professors at his college were all behind him. There was 5 like famous thinkers, and he goes, well, Professor, you know, what are you guys doing here? And they said, well, we heard this is something that no humans have seen before, which was true, inside the tube looking out. But you couldn't explain to Grandma how it was inside a wave. So all the big thinkers came to see this thing that was first presented to the public.
I think when people that haven't been around the ocean a lot, when they see the photos that I take in the water, the common questions that I get is, wow, you know, are you on a board or are you on a boat? It sounds so silly to me because you're inside the wave with the guy and they just can't comprehend how you got the photo. And I'm like, no, like I have swim fins and I'm swimming and I have a camera that I put in this lunchbox of a contraption that gets kind of heavy, and you know, you stick it up there and you're basically like, you're letting the wave kind of like pitch over you and hoping to swim through the back of it.
I think the reaction for people outside of the surf world is almost a bit better because they're kind of like, whoa, like how did you swim in that? How, like, they don't understand, like it could be a fisheye shot in the middle of a bar. They're like, are you on a boat? And I was like, no, you're kidding, like you're not on a boat. I think, especially in Ireland, because people know how cold it is and how, you know, kind of like horrible, I guess, the weather can be here in Ireland. So I think a lot of the people who don't surf and don't use the ocean in Ireland are like, oh, you're crazy. Like just getting out there in freezing cold weather and swimming in these big waves is just a bit mad.
The reason why I love shooting from the water rather than the land is simply because it gives you so many different options and perspectives. You can really only get a few perspectives from land, but in the water, just depending on the lens you have, whether it's a 200 lens and you can shoot far, or I love the fisheye, especially at places like the Wedge or when it's super hollow, and to just put myself right in the action, it's the next best thing for me to surf.
I would say that one water shot is equal to about 20 land shots, pretty much. That's how unique they are and how the angle is so different than when you shoot a telephoto from the land. It's more of a flat perspective. From the water, it's got dimension to it.
The advantages to shooting in the water are just getting, a unique angle that the typical viewer on the beach isn't going to see. And it's crazy because in the water, there's so much to being in the right place at the right time, and somebody from 5 feet to the right or left of you could miss the shot and you'll be in the perfect spot to get it.
In bodyboarding, I always had this thing for going out in bigger surf, heavier surf. That was just something I enjoyed, and I would see things that were just crazy, and the sort of things that's really hard to communicate to the layperson that doesn't go in the ocean. And in Hawaii, people are fascinated with big waves, right? But the footage that you see or the stuff that people see from the beach is one perspective. And even a lot of the photographs are either shot from land or shot from the safety of a channel or a jet ski.
Nowadays, anyone can take a photo from the beach. The cameras are autofocus, the lenses, you just point it and hit the trigger, and you're gonna get something.
It's really all about unique angles and knowing the wave. Whereas on the beach, it was all about, hey, can I move in? Can I get a spot next to you? Because you're in the exact perfect spot that we all want to be in. There was something unique about the water photography compared to from the beach.
And I think that's an entirely different perspective that you see when you're out there surfing and you're really, really in the mix, like in the lineup, in the impact zone. And that's what I thought would be cool to try to capture. And I thought, wide angle lenses were the best way to kind of capture that. And also to put myself in positions where, that view that you get when you're paddling over like a 30-foot wave and looking down into the pit, it's like a pretty unique view. That would be really cool to show the world what that looks like.
Yeah, when you get in the water and start shooting and people start recognizing you as the photographer, he's in the water shooting, it's a good feeling. And when you get to show them as they're coming past or something, or they're like, "Wow, did you get that shot?" And they're like, "Yeah, have a look." And they're all amping on it, so it's good. It's a good feeling for sure.
Initially did decide that I wanted to shoot from water instead of land was because I had a better opportunity of getting my work seen and published over shooting on land with 20 other of the top photographers. I would get the same shots as them, maybe even a little better, but I couldn't compete because they have the connections and they're with these publications and already getting paid. So if I could get one unique shot out of the whole day that no one else had, a unique angle shooting fisheye, that was way more valuable for me than having a whole card full of photos that everybody else already had.
My other theory about shooting from the water is you always get something. Even on a lesser day, you always get something that's unique. That's what makes it so much better than from the land, because you always get something.
And you also have to go out in some pretty consequential surf, because on the small days, there's also a lot of guys shooting from the water. And the only way to stand out is to try to do something different. So that's going to be my motivation to try that.
Most water photographers have a favorite among their photos, and there's usually a great story to go along with it.
As far as a water shot goes, I'd have to say my very favorite shot, it's not even an action shot, but it's a photo of Andy Irons. And Andy was paddling out after just catching a really good wave at Pipeline, and this wave started breaking in the background. And Andy turned to me and looked and said, "Living the dream, Bielmann, living the dream," and turned back to look at the wave right as I shot that photograph. And that photo is by far, hands down, my favorite surf shot from the water, of Pipeline especially.
One of my most famous photos, I'd have to say, is this Hawaiian Buttons Kaluhio Kalani. And Buttons was a character. On land, he'd be doing dances, and he made everybody laugh. In surfing, it's like one man on one wave, and when it's crowded, it gets really intense. Guys start getting mad, or girls, and everybody starts hassling everybody. So Buttons had dropped in on a local guy who was screaming and yelling at him, "I'm gonna break your neck, I'm gonna," and Buttons, who is perfect for diffusing because of how he is, just at that 1/500th of a second when he goes, "Peace, bro," click, I got the photo, and he's looking back at the guy who had a mohawk.
Once a male-dominated industry, a new generation of female photographers is closing the gap in surf photography.
There's people out there who don't use their gender as an excuse, and they just do what they want to do, no matter what it is, and they love doing it. That's the one thing that really stands out, is you can tell Krista loves what she does.
So the water photographer I know from Porto is Maria. She was out there today and it was pretty solid, so it's pretty cool to see a female out there, you know, pushing the limits.
But yeah, Krista is gnarly. It's amazing to watch her shoot. I don't, I guess, put as much effort lately into social media as I should, but I've been seeing her stuff and like, I never got a shot like that all day. Not trying to say that I'm any better, I'm not. But like, I'm like, dang, I'm a little jealous.
Maria Fernanda, I see her stuff on Instagram all the time, and I've seen her images from like pretty big Puerto Escondido, which I imagine is also like a very challenging spot to shoot in the water. I know she goes out at Waimea, you know, Pipeline on some pretty sizable days. And I've seen one or two other girls, I don't know who they are, but yeah, they're out there representing.
I love it that there's more girls trying to push their limits, you know, and trying to push themselves to actually start swimming out and capturing these waves. And I think it's good for us as women to just help each other and building each other up.
It's really cool to see ladies pushing the boundaries with surf photography.
Being a surf photographer, especially a traveling surf photographer, we travel all over the world, and you would never know who you're going to run into. And one of the beauties of traveling and that I've enjoyed all my life is the characters that I've met on the road, and I've met quite a few. And that reminds me of a time when I was in Bali in 1980, and again, there was very few Americans there, mostly Australians and Europeans, and of course the local Indonesians. So one night I was in the restaurant with Kuta Beach in Bali with my friend Roy Russell, lightning bolt team, and we had just come out of the dining room and we were in the bar, and we heard a commotion in the dining room, and all of our lifeguard friends from the daytime that were waiters at the restaurant at night, and we saw them running into the room and asked them what they were doing, and they said, "Oh, this guy's being very rude. You know, we're gonna beat him up." I said, "Oh, let's go see." So we go in there, and I see this guy standing on a chair at his table by himself, and he was throwing these rupiah bills into the air and singing some crazy song. I thought, oh my gosh, this guy's gonna die. And my friend Roy Russell goes, "That is Bill Murray." I looked and I said, "No way, that is Bill Murray." And this was right after he filmed Caddyshack, and it was on Saturday Night Live. And anyway, we grabbed him, told him he had to come with us, and we took him into the bar, and we said, "What are you doing here?" And there was an actor's strike, so he was upset, so he said he put one finger on New York and one finger on the other side of the globe, and here I am. And that was in Bali, Indonesia, in 1980. So anyway, he said, "What are we doing there?" And we said, "Well, we're gonna go to Java." We said, "Well, I wanna go." So we brought him with us, quite a journey to get there. We'd stop along the way, and as we're walking up the beach, the natives there were carrying our duffel bags, our surfboards, and all these things. And I saw two of them were carrying cases of champagne on their head, and one was carrying a case of Stolichnaya vodka. And I said, "What? Who brought that?" And I looked at Bill, and he smirked and said, "Oh, I brought some refreshments." Anyway, that just started off 10 days in the treehouse of insanity, listening to Bill Murray tell stories, listening to Roy Russell tell stories, and just mayhem.
With the saturation of content on both social media and the internet, print media has become nearly obsolete, affecting the livelihood of surf photographers.
Modern media now online, like Instagram and social media and banner ads and all those type of things that go on online, are really interesting because the print media has fizzled. So this is really interesting. Print media made the surf photographers heroes in the day. They made us surf stars. They did portfolios. They followed us, our editorial around the world. And that name, when you had a photo credit in there a lot, it made you a surf hero, legend, etc. So in the day, the most famous surf photographers had all their photos were in print. Nowadays, what's so interesting is the most famous surf photographers in the world are the ones with the biggest Instagram followings. So it's shifted to online because of Instagram, your followers. Whereas before it was what was sold to the public. Now it's just given to the public.
I think with social media these days, that's kind of created a lot of white noise for people. They kind of just flick through, and like a photo that might have put you in a really dangerous situation, and it might have, taken a lot of money to get to that location, and you might have had to swim out and gotten, really pounded, and they just kind of look at it for 2 seconds and flick to the next one.
I would say it's very hard for photographers to make money now. Back in the beginning, when I was first coming up as a pro, there were magazines paying photographers retainers, monthly salaries, cover all their expenses, their flights, their accommodations when they travel, and still they're making extra money with ads in the mag. So, I mean, they could make a living,
Each country used to have probably 2 to 3 magazines. Each magazine probably had 4 to 6 photographers, sometimes 10 photographers. And I looked around the other day and I couldn't believe it. It was like, literally, there's almost no magazines left anymore. And being on the North Shore, and every winter you'd see all these friends that you hadn't seen for ages. All these other photographers would show up from around the world, and they're just not here anymore. It's the strangest thing.
I feel that the online media, social media, it's the evolution of man, kind of, so you adapt to that. And surf photography has changed a lot, because when you go shoot, especially for bigger clients, you got to shoot video or have a friend do it to go with your job, and then you have to do water, land. It's evolving. It's just morphed into something else. And if you can't figure out how to do that dance, then you can't dance. Don't go on the dance floor.
Water photographers aren't always rewarded financially. However, it's the passion that keeps them coming back.
I think the most gratifying thing as a water photographer is just getting that image. I mean, it's really in the hunt. But then when you receive the comments from your images, it's pretty amazing when people are asking, how did you get that shot, and what position were you in, and how could you get in that place? And it's pretty gratifying to bring that kind of image to where people are just wondering, how in the world did you do that?
When I get out into the water to shoot surf photos, I'm there to get a great photograph, but when I come in after a session, I just feel wonderful, and I just feel like this is what life's all about. This is the rewards of life.
I think God places some gifts and qualities in each one of us, and it's almost our duty to actually give that back to the world, Like, if we don't take advantage of that and we don't use our gifts, we're wasting them. So I think it's a responsibility for each one of us to actually work on them.
When you get a photo that's like kind of like super amazing and you get to share it with people and they get a little rush out of it, that's cool. I don't know. It's a little bit of an artistic expression.
I think my favorite thing about shooting from the water, honestly, is just like seeing my group of friends that shoot photos that honestly I probably wouldn't hang out with anywhere else. But when you're out in the lineup, you haven't seen these guys for maybe a couple months or something, and it's kind of like, I guess, going to the bar with some buddies and watching the football game, except for us, we're just watching perfect waves at Pipeline. I'd say that's kind of, for me, that's what I like about it the most.
I think it's incredible that photography freezes time. And so you take that little time traveling section and that moment, and you get to share it with people, and that's a great feeling.
That moment when you nail a shot is what makes all the crappy stuff kind of worth it, Like, I mean, like sometimes, you know, you see it's cloudy all day and there's this little gap in the horizon and it's the right tide for the right wave and the wind's right. And, you know, the sun pops out and all these elements align. The wind is pointing the right way, the swell is pointing the right way, the surfer is on point, you know, and they're about to drop in and you know, okay, the light's perfect, the wind's perfect, the wave's sick. Like the surfer has been surfing good all day and you're like, please, like, don't fall. Just like, you know, just pull in, get in the bar. And then there's that moment where you're swimming and you're like, okay, have I aligned right? And I always find, especially some spots in Ireland, you know, you're being sucked out to sea kind of almost, and you're fighting that when the wave is coming in. So you're like swimming against it. And then there's that moment where you swim against it, and you just kind of release and let yourself go through the wave. And that moment is just magic.
When the sets calm down, the waves are calm, you can lay down and just look at the environment. It's just beautiful. You look at things as you go under. And then at the same time, when you know you're actually getting the shots, like not just one, but a bunch of them, by the time you go into the boat or into land, you're just elated. It's kind of like, it's hard to describe. It's like got all that body chemistry going. It's surging through you, which is excitement and calmness, and you feel physically fit. It's like like all athletes, it's kind of an athletic type of thing. All athletes get that feeling, and that's what it is. That's what drives you forward, because you have the physical part of it that feels great and the emotional part, which is awesome.
If I have this passion and this gift to be able to swim in big waves and capture those amazing images, then that's what I should be doing, you know, sharing that with the world and with the people that probably are never going to be able to swim out and watch what I'm enjoying front row.
All the respect. Anyone who gets out there in these heavy conditions and puts it on the line, not even for a lot of money, just for that feeling and that enjoyment of, you know, pushing your own limits, and that, I've got to give them all the respect.
This has been an incredible ride for me. I spent 40 years of my life chasing waves around the world. Even though it's a tough situation these days, business-wise, for surf photographers, if that's your dream, you gotta chase it.
You know, I'd have to say, like, the guys out of Pipe, especially like Zach Doyle and my nephew Brent, they are just phenomenal swimmers and just creating absolutely incredible images. And it's funny because, you know, I opened a lot of doors for Brent, I must say, but I certainly wasn't able to teach him how to be such a badass waterman, because he's a far better water photographer than I ever was.
Just seeing the waves gives me like this excitement of like adrenaline, where I'm like, oh man, I want to be out there. Like I want to feel the power of the waves, like on the reef. I want to feel that shake in the ocean and hear the sound and the excitement when it's really good and people like throwing their arms up or yelling when someone gets a good wave.
The feeling I get from being out in the waves at times can be a real meditative kind of feeling, like being away from all your emails and just the day-to-day hecticness. It just completely goes as soon as you're out there in the waves.
I've got a tremendous amount of respect for all the water photographers out there. They work really hard, so to see all their work pay off, and I've seen some amazing water photos, and I'm pretty thankful to be a part of it and be the subject of some of those photos sometimes.
For me, when I'm finished shooting on a big day and coming in and arriving to my house, it's like really satisfying and really accomplishing that I made it safe and sound.
When the conditions are right, then yeah, you just gotta go, because you could potentially get the best shot you've ever got. So that is the motivation, what keeps you going through these cold conditions.
So I think the most favorite photo that Dan Merkel ever took of me was a cutback shot. I was wearing a yellow vest, and it was my first cover in Surfing Magazine, which was one of the top surfing magazines at the time. And I remember seeing that shot with my father in his bedroom, and it was the first time I'd ever been on the cover of an international magazine. And that picture still has so much emotional connectivity to me.
Have fun with it. Don't worry about so much if you're making any money. Enjoy what you're doing, and just keep at it, because you're gonna keep getting better shots, improve. Just enjoy the sport and don't get hurt.